All right, everyone. Gosh, finally, I think we might be live now. Um, Thank you for your patience, everyone. I appreciate it. I apologize before we had a bit of it working, but it turned out to be let me just pause that. Turned out to be sort of like an echo, and it was driving people crazy. So yeah, I really apologize for that, everyone. And I'm glad that you're all able to see it now. You know, as much as I like Google products, they can be a little finicky, and run across that from time to time. Everything has to be really perfect, otherwise it has a hissy fit. So again, thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to be talking about letters of recommendation, and I do apologize if we're going to probably be running a little bit later. So if you have to leave for work because you're in the middle of your lunch hour or something like that, I understand. I'll definitely send out the link afterwards so that you can catch the rest of it if you had to leave early. So definitely want to appreciate you guys for just even joining, though. So let's talk about letters of recommendation first, and then what I'm going to do is afterwards we'll have some questions and answers. But let me just switch to my slides real quick. So give me a second here. All right, that looks kind of right. And all right, I think that's good. All right, so what makes a good letter of recommendation, and why does it matter is what we're going to be talking about tonight. So as I mentioned, I think if you saw our workshop last time, we always introduce ourselves. So you probably, if you were here last time, this will be repetitive for you. But again, my name is Kevin Marshall. Work a lot with the interview side of things here at IDC, as well as the application side. I work closely with our editors. And at one time I was the main one doing editing, and we found that there was a lot going on. So we brought in some excellent editors to help us with applications, which has made a huge difference. A lot of them who work, one or two of them who actually both of our main editors have either worked at universities or currently do work at universities. And so they're experts, and they see a lot of CVs go through in general, as well as statement of purposes. And one of the things that they do a lot of actually are letters of recommendation. And you might be thinking, if you're kind of new to this world, like, what do you mean they do? What our editors help with letters of recommendation? But it is true. Even though in a perfect world, a letter of recommendation would be written by your previous professor, dean, etc., and then just submitted to through your application to the school. We have a lot of requests from clients to help with getting their letters of recommendation. Well, mostly from making them look good, making them sound authentic, crafting a great letter, so that when they submit those letters to the schools, they make a huge impression. So we do play a large role in this, and it's something that I think everyone needs to really kind of think about, because People spend a lot of time on all these different elements of the application, of course, and there's so many different things that you need to focus on, including test scores and including making sure you have all your TOEFL high, etc., making sure that you have a great CV, a great SOP, all your ducks in a row. And then where do the letters fit into this? In some ways, as we've said before many, many times, uh, all these things, each one piece of this big pie is not enough to make you or break you, but each thing adds up to the sum of making you as a candidate really stand out. And so, no, it's true that if you don't have amazing letters, it's not going to break you completely, especially if you have a very strong application overall. But when we're talking about it, and I always say this, when we're talking about if you're an average candidate, a letter of recommendation is one of those things that can knock you up, notch you up 1 point or 2 points, and as well as I said, SOPs can do that. CVs can help. And so the application documents start to become really important, especially as we start to look more and more like other candidates on paper. So this is how we differentiate ourselves. And so one of the most important aspects, well, one of the big factors is a great letter or two, or depending on the number of letters the school will accept. Of course, you'll always want to do. Usually, it's about 2. There may be a few programs that take more, but that's usually the standard. So let's get into some of the basics, shall we? So we're talking about some structure stuff with guidelines for structure. Here we go. Guidelines for structure, less than a page. Obviously, if you're going, I've seen a couple letters that go beyond that. This is not appropriate. Don't want to have more than a page. Approximately 2 to 3 paragraphs. You don't want a letter that's going to be like filling up the entire page. This is not an essay. This is a statement by someone in your favor. And make sure to have, if you can address the person that you're sending this to, that's fine. Often, though, with applications, it'll just be to whom it may concern. Is a popular way to kind of address that. Yeah, again, if you know the program sort of director and they've asked you to address things to them in general, that would be kind of a unique case. But in general, we're just kind of making it a general to whom it may concern type thing. And then you want to make sure you have the date correct and in the right position, the author's signature at the bottom. You want to have their position, their address, even if it's going to be an address outside of the US, you want to have that address, their contact info, their email address in there, their phone if you can, as much as information as you can to verify who they are. So that all needs to be in the letter to verify that this is who they are, who they say they are. So now we get into stuff like, okay, well, this is great. But if you're asking, well, how do I control that all this goes into the letter? I'm not the one writing the letter. And this is where we kind of come in and start to address, like, how do you do this? How do you get your professor, your dean, ex-professor, dean, or someone that you've worked under, maybe someone you've observed, a dentist that you've observed, your boss, again, in the dental clinic you're working for. How do you get these people to write you letters? Often this is going to be you, of course, and most of you know this. You're going to be the one writing these letters initially, and in some cases, in an optimal case, they may be the ones that do it for you, and they may say, yeah, actually, I'd like to do that. But a lot of times they just don't have the time. So as we recommend, I may go into that in a second, but you're going to want to make sure, let's see. Oh, this is actually kind of what I want to talk about here. I want to talk about obtaining a good letter of recommendation. And when you're thinking about, um, first of all, who to ask, you need to make sure that you're considering the weight of the people involved. Um, a dean is going to have a higher weight than someone maybe that you've just worked, in terms of an internship at like a research internship that you've spent a few months at. Your dean of your dental school is going to be important, so they're going to carry more weight. Someone like a boss that you worked with for 3 years is going to carry more weight. A boss that you worked with when you were an associate dentist may carry more weight than a boss that you were just a dental assistant with. So think about those kind of things. And of course, you only have usually 2 letters to submit. So you have to choose, if you have 3 or 4 people that you're considering, you have to choose who you're going to select. And many times they'll require the dean as one of those people. So then you have an extra letter. Who do you choose with for that extra letter? And in my chats with clients, I often recommend, it's a case per case basis. Like I say, if you have some experience in your home country as an associate dentist, um, I would probably try to get a letter from your former boss, given that they were a dentist, and see if they can write you one, especially if you've had like 2 years plus. But then there are some cases where I've said different things, where like someone had an internship, a research internship at a U.S. University, and they worked with a pretty renowned professor who was considerably prominent in the field. Because their name is bigger, that's when you'd want to choose someone like that. Also, it's nice to have someone who's a U.S., like sometimes a U.S. dentist or a U.S. dental professor can carry a little more weight for people who are reviewing these applications and people for these programs than if they're just from your home country. So we try to recommend having at least one of your letters be from someone U.S. based. So again, like it really depends on your personal situation. There's not like a hard, rule, black or white rule with this. You have to kind of use your judgment. And depending on like what your situation is, you have to select the right person. But I would recommend really, obviously someone from your dental school, usually the dean, if you can, and then also someone who's again a U.S. based dentist, and even better would be like a U.S. Dental professor or something like that. If you're doing a master's program in public, public healthcare management or something like that, maybe I might, if you don't have any other options, that might be another one, like a professor there or the dean there. But I would try to focus, make sure that if you can, all your letters are from dentists. And again, academic even better. Plan ahead. If you haven't started thinking about this by now, now's the time to get on this. You need to have time for whomever you request a letter to write this up, at least to review what you've sent them as a draft. And they're very busy. And what is interesting about letters are that people will say yes in an email, like sure, I'll be happy to give you a letter, and then they won't do anything about it for weeks and weeks and weeks at a time. So when you're sending your email to them, be extremely cordial. Offer to write a draft, basically the letter, because often they won't have the time or desire to. Even if they say they are happy to do so, most of the time they won't. And so, and in a way, it's good. I mean, we get into a kind of a unique situation where a professor or a dean says, yes, I'll be happy to do that for you. In fact, I'll write the letter for you. Don't bother sending me a draft. But if they're, let's say their grammar isn't very good or they're not really great at writing, that's a little hard because you can't, you want to be able to have them sign that, and you want to be able to, edit that if you need. But it's a little rude if you send it back and be like, hey, there's all these grammatical errors, etc. So that's kind of a unique situation, and we've come across that before. When you're creating your draft to send to them, you're going to want to have someone in the US, like someone who's an editor or someone who's quite proficient in English and writing, to help you with that draft and make sure that it's solid. We're going to get into that in a second because it's very important, like what goes into that. And then be very clear about your deadlines. Like, let them know when you need this by. If you're applying for Capit in April, they don't need to know April. If your date that you want to apply is in the end of April or the beginning of May, and it was right now, I would tell them a month. I would tell them March. The closer you can make your deadline to them, the more likely they are to get it into you by the time you need to apply. But if you tell them April, they may forget until that time, and then they're rushing and scrambling, and you have to delay your application. So you don't want to do that. And then nudge when necessary. Give them an email every couple of weeks if they're not responding to you. Just say, hey, thanks. Again, just checking in with you, how that letter is going. Let me know if I can do anything on my end to help you out with that. So those are some overall kind of guidelines for getting a letter. And I'd like to get into what can you do in terms of the content. Now I put this in there, the 3 Ps. For me, a good letter should contain elements of these 3 things. Potential, and what I mean by that is they should demonstrate and basically showcase your potential as a candidate, as an outstanding candidate for the program. Your performance, whether that's academic, whether that's clinical, in some way, whether that's extracurricular even, especially dental-related extracurricular. And then it's important to include aspects of your personality. So these are just some guidelines. Of course, there are other things, but I like to make sure that all these things are in there. They really should demonstrate you as an outstanding candidate, and also someone that they're going to enjoy working with. So that's why the personality bit comes in. Yes, you may be outstanding academically, clinically. You may have amazing potential to be an incredible dentist, but if you have a bad attitude, that's not attractive. So how do we make sure to also include a great personality that's happy to learn, willing to learn, and willing to get involved, in whatever needs to be done. So in terms of the guidelines, of course, as you're writing this out, think about these things. You're going to want to be clear about discussing the context for your relationship with that individual. How do they know you? Is this the dean? Is this a professor that you had? Is this a former boss or a current boss? Whatever that is, be clear about, and you're writing from their point of view. So you're going to want to make sure that they include the nature of your relationship. Now, a lot of the times what gets a little sticky is that because a lot of schools sometimes schools require that they get a letter of recommendation from a dean. And we've had a couple cases where candidates basically didn't know their dean. It was such a big program in their dental school, maybe sometimes 500, class of 500 or something. How would they possibly know each student? That's a little tricky, and I can only say that at that point, you just have to do your best to create a letter that is as plausible sounding as possible. And so if you didn't really know your dean at all, the hope is that if you send them a letter, now you can't lie and make up stories, but the hope is that you can make your letter as personal as possible, without, basically, you can't make up a story that, I met so-and-so during this class and they were a great student if that didn't happen, or I met them during an extracurricular thing if that didn't happen. So it's a little tricky with those kind of things. And that's, often we can help kind of craft that with you. Our editors can help you figure out how to do that. We can chat with you more about, like, okay, well, you didn't know your dean, but very well, but what were some of the instances where you got to meet them? And do you remember, was there any sort of interaction? Um, or if they were to look at your, another way to approach it is if they were to look at your CV that you put together, if they were to read your SOP, and know your academic background at the dental school, what could they say about you? What could they honestly say? They could say that you were a member of this, and this dental club. They could say that you took part in these dental camps. They could say that you had a fantastic, GPA. They could say these things as the dean, and it would all be honest. And so in that case, you're basically utilizing your background, your experience, for them to be able to make an honest, good case for you. And most of the time, a dean will be happy to, knowing that they don't have the ability to meet all the dental students in their school, they'll usually be happy to be flexible about that, and even, mention how great of a person you were, etc. Sometimes they'll even mention that they met you. If you are in a situation that's better though, where you did have a relationship with your dean, or you had a relationship with the professor at your dental school that you've decided to go with for the letter, fantastic. Now let's get in. How do you introduce you as the student from their point of view? You want to have them mention your knowledge of dentistry, basically your knowledge as a dental practitioner, and someone not just who came in knowing everything, but someone who is willing to learn, who was quick to learn, and who performed quite well through their coursework and through their clinical work. Also, someone who had a motivation for dentistry, if you can. In these letters, you don't have much time, you don't have much space. So even though there's many things on this list, I don't want you to necessarily put everything in this letter, because otherwise it would be a page or two. But think about the things that you do resonate with, that you do connect with on this list, and maybe you choose 4 or 5 things. Motivation for dentistry could be an important one, especially if they saw you interacting with patients in a way that demonstrated a lot of passion, or a lot of great bedside manners, etc. If they could see you're at great academic ability, solid GPA or high GPA even. And then communication and personality. What were your experiences with them? And I want to mention that this is a good area when you start talking about your communication skills, your personality, that they had interactions with you. This is a good time to bring in stories. And if you can recount some incidences with that professor, with that dean, or whomever this is the time to bring in a story that demonstrates you had the great, great clinical skills, or that demonstrates you had great bedside manners, or that demonstrates your motivation. Find a good story that is true, that's honest, that they will remember when you send them this draft, and make it personable. Make it something that when they read that, they'll be like, yeah, that's true about them. I do remember, interacting with this person. Maybe they saw you, staying late one night working in the lab, and they made a comment to you. Maybe they interacted with you at a dental camp and saw what a great leader you were, or how dedicated you were to the patients. Whatever that is, bring that story into there. You want to have at least one story, I would say, one incident that you can recount in a letter of recommendation. If it's just like, he's a great guy, great GPA, he'll be great, and that's the gist of it, okay, that's fine, but it doesn't actually make me, as the program, if I'm the program and I'm reviewing your application, I read this letter, if there's no personal touch to it, if there's no story to kind of cement the fact that this person really did know you and they did care about you, then it's not as strong of a letter, and you will really want to shoot for that. And that's why, if you have the option to choose people that know you better, go for it. Really make sure you do that. Self-discipline, this may or may not be something you want to put in, discuss in there, but it could be good. Someone who's very prompt, takes their grades seriously, and takes the rules series of the clinic, the rules and the procedures, takes treatments very seriously. Self-discipline can be positive. And I wouldn't use the word self-discipline. I would just kind of give you the feeling of someone who's very mature and someone who exemplifies maturity, basically. Potential for greatness. You know, especially if you were somebody who was a leader at your dental school, if you were someone who took part in a lot of maybe you took part in research, or you took part in various opportunities that they had. You know, if you see yourself one day as a leader or as someone significant in the dental field, hopefully they did too, and this is an opportunity where you can kind of like present that this is a person who's going to make it. This is a person who's going to shine one day. You're going to want to have them at your dental school, kind of thing. And then comparison to peers, if you can. I mean, how did you do? I mean, and when we talk about honors and awards, did you win any awards? Did you receive any honors for, best student, best GPA, best patient bedside manner? I mean, whatever you shined in, make sure that it is clear that you were standing out from amongst your peers. Any special attributes that you had, any special skills that you had, everything you can put. This is the time to really brainstorm, make a list of all the things, and hopefully you did this for your SOP as well. But this is the time to really brainstorm about what makes you unique, and put that in the letter. This is the time to add that. So let me see. As we go through these, you're going to want to make sure that you're adding all these things to the draft, and then you're going to want to start whittling away a lot of this stuff, because what we find is we get drafts of letters of recommendation that are again, either they're too vague, they're too long, and our challenge usually with our clients is to take that and make it as clear cut, as straightforward as we can, but also as powerful as we can. So let me see. I had a couple things I wanted to in. And see if I can find that. So I think in general, that's what I mostly wanted to chat it with you tonight. At this point, I'm just going to read a quick letter that I thought was pretty good. To whom it may concern, I'm writing on behalf of such and such student who's a graduate of our university. We'll just say Sam graduated with the highest honors and went on to immediately pass her board exams. She took part in a year-long internship where her supervisor gave her exceptional high marks. According to reports detailing her internship, Samantha took and interpreted x-rays, diagnosed dental problems, implemented treatment plans. She skillfully applied sealants to children's teeth, fixed broken and chipped teeth on children. Sam extracted teeth, performed numerous root canals during her internship. She also provided basic dental services to patients. Sam demonstrated excellent skills at taking molds, gave explicit instructions for making dentures and supervised their fitting, demonstrated special talent for working with elderly patients, made them feel comfortable with their dentures. So there's an element there of like patient bedside manner. She was clear and precise in explaining proper care to patients. And then she kind of goes into community service. Sam visited elementary schools in the community, did presentations, education about dental hygiene. And then we go into sort of the business side, demonstrated a clear understanding of the administrative side of dentistry by communicating with suppliers, etc. Also effective as supervising dental hygienists, assistants. I believe Sam will has a promising career as a dentist. And then it's with great pleasure that I recommend her for the program, etc. So, and this one was more geared from someone who obviously was not a professor or a dean, but actually was a supervisor when they were an associate. So as you could hear it, there was a lot of specific things that they discussed. What they did during her time there, what types of treatments she performed, her interactions with patients being very important, and also her community service, things that she did outside of just her normal routines, and then also the business side. So that just gives you quickly an idea of like what kind of things you'd want to include if you were asking someone who is your boss or something like that. What I'm going to do right now is get into a few questions. So why don't we go through and see if the chat room has any questions. Okay. Can a reapplicant use the same letter again? Technically, yes, you could, but I would say be careful if it's the same school. If it were me, I would probably try to use a different letter if I was applying to the same school, or I might I might consider changing one of the people that I've chosen as my recommenders. I might find another person that's a little stronger if I was again applying to the same school. But if it was a different school than before, and they hadn't seen that letter before, I think that would be fine to do, because a good letter is a good letter. What if I can't get a letter from my dean because of country restrictions? Yori, if you could explain what that means, why would there be country restrictions? Don't know what that means, so I'm gonna let if you're listening to this, if you could give me more information about why. What can I do if the dean has changed from the time when I was a student? Can I get a letter from the current dean or the previous dean? So Navia writes this. I would say this is a tough one, and we've come across this before a few times. If you can, I would try to track down the previous dean, and the reason I would do that is because they are the ones who were there during your time as a dental student. So the current dean, it's possible you could use the current dean if the school is requiring the current dean. And if it's requirement's a requirement, they can't, they're putting you in the position of having to to present this letter from a dean. And so if you can't track down your previous dean and they're gone, and in one case we had a client, I believe, whose dean had died, so that was definitely not going to work, then the current dean is the next best thing. And what the current dean can at least attest is, well, I've reviewed their records, even though I wasn't the dean while he or she was the student here. I can attest that their records are this, and they were a great student, they were involved in these clubs, etc. They completed everything, all that stuff. If you can track down your previous dean, I would try to. I would look on Facebook, I would Google them, I would do anything you can to try to get their email address, see where they're maybe they're teaching at another university, or they've retired, and see if you can get them to write you that and just say, you know, this is very important to me. I know that you've moved on, but like I say, the school's requested that I contact the dean, who was basically the dean while I was going to school. Hopefully they'll understand that, and if you can, I would try to do that, because they might be able to give you a better recommendation that again includes more personal, like, you know, they were a great student. I interacted with them in these occasions, etc., and that's what you kind of want. So please, if you can, do that. Can Dean write my U.S. experience after that I graduate from my school? The dean probably shouldn't be writing too much about your experience after dental school, because they don't have any experience with you. This is again to Rem. They don't really have any knowledge of what you've been doing after, unless you tell them. So if you write a bunch of stuff about how when you graduated you did all this, this, and this. I was, you know, she was an associate dentist after she graduated. Then she went to the U.S., was a dental assistant, and she observed. The program's going to definitely know that you wrote the letter. I mean, it's not even going to be hidden anymore, or at least kind of subtle. It'll be very clear that you wrote this letter, not them. And so you want to at least do your best to make sure that this letter sounds authentic, that it's coming from the dean, not from you. And that's important whenever you're writing these letters. Yes, you're doing a draft, but don't write them from your point of view. Write them from their point of view. What would they know about you? What reasonably would they know about you? What reasonably could they say about you? And so I wouldn't put anything in there about my US experience after that. I would really keep it to my relationship with them. What does that entail? What does that cover? And that's what I talked about at the beginning, is like, what's the nature of your relationship together? It's not that you were in the US, it's that you were at their dental school. You can then go to, like you say, like a US dentist who you worked for, and then you can ask them for a letter to get that stuff. How old can a letter be? From Jin. I mean, that's a good question. If you have a letter that's 2 years old, let's say, see if you can reach out to the person who wrote it and just say, hey, I'm updating my application this year. I have this letter. It was a fantastic letter. Would you mind if I sent you an updated version with a new date, and would you mind signing it? Or if you don't need them to sign it, would you mind if I submit it on your behalf? And again, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but a lot of times with CAPID, you can submit it, but then include their email address, and then CAPID will email them, or the school will email them and confirm that, you know, they gave you this letter of recommendation, so that they know it's authentic. So in that case, I really would reach out to that person and just let them know what's going on, because they're going to be reached out anyway. So I mean, if you have a 2-year-old letter and you're sending it in, and then they email that person, they're going to know that you submitted it again anyway. You might as well make them aware of it beforehand, that this letter is going to be used again, and would you mind updating it, or would you mind just signing the new version when I correct the date? And usually people will be completely fine about that. Again, give them time. That's the important stuff. Make sure you have lots of time. Yori, you kind of answered my question. You gave me some more information. What if I can't get a letter from my dean because of country restrictions? They're from Cuba. That's a case-by-case basis. If you'd like to, you can send me an email. We can chat a bit more about that. I'd like to know more specifically. Send an email to mail@International Dentist Central, and we can chat about like what that entails. Because if you're wondering if that would not be possible because of, and you obviously know more than I do about this, but if it's because the U.S. won't recognize that, I'm not sure what's going on. But I know that even we've had clients from Iran who were able to there's obviously political tensions between the U.S. and Iran, but definitely they were able to utilize and get lots of letters of recommendation. Even a letter of recommendation from a high political figure there. So I'm not sure exactly why that wouldn't be possible, that you could get a letter from your dean in Cuba, unless you just can't communicate with them. That's a different story then. But if that's the case and you really can't, your next best option is to state what the actual reason is. I imagine if you can put some, if you can add some notes to your application about what logistical reasons you couldn't connect with a dean, there was some reason you could not, and then explain why you're using another person instead of the dean would be, I guess, the best way to go. Capita asks, for 3, would you recommend that I get a letter of recommendation from the dentist under whom I did shadowing and volunteering? I mean, this is for Rosalina, I wouldn't necessarily recommend any particular thing to everybody. I don't know your situation. So if the school, these 3 letters, and so, obviously you're going to use a dean. Hopefully if you practiced, you might use someone from your home country, maybe that you worked under as a boss. And then, I would try to get someone at least with a U.S., like a U.S. dentist, if you could. At least one of those should have someone from the U.S. that can really talk you up. That would be great. Let me real quick, by the way, because I'm this. All right, here I'm back. Okay, we'll keep going with some questions here. Again, if you have particular questions about your unique situation, feel free to send us an email. We can do our best to kind of give you some quick advice. We can't promise that we'll get to everybody's, be able to answer everyone's personal situation in any depth, but we can give you a couple like thoughts that we have. In my dental school, our dean will write a solid letter for every student. Is that helpful too? Sure, that's helpful, especially if the school that you're applying to requires one of those letters to be a dean's letter, then absolutely that's helpful. That being said, if it's not going to be very unique and personal to you, you're going to want to make up for that in the other letter or 2 that you can submit, and make those extremely personable and really talk you up even further, especially if the dean just sends out like a standard letter. But again, a lot of times the schools will require one of those letters to be a dean's letter. In that case, that's going to obviously be helpful to have that. Can we write the letter and just take the signature from the dean? Yes, if they are okay with that, if the dean's okay with that, or if the others are okay with that. I think it's a great option, especially if you can do some work and make sure it sounds great beforehand and sounds very professional. Again, get some help with that. Don't just submit kind of your own, especially depending on how skilled you are with writing, don't just throw something together and send it and then submit that. Really get some help, because the better it looks, it's going to make a huge difference. Let's see. Would you suggest using a letter from a faculty member, from faculty at different institutes, or a combination of faculty and dentist I worked with? So if the choice is between, maybe you have 3 letters, if you're asking if I should choose through all 3 from an academic side, or a combination of maybe 1 academic and 2 work, or 2 academics and 1 work. In this case, what I would say is think about what your experiences are, what's going to look best for you. I'll give you a couple different examples. Like, if I had been to 2 universities, let's say I have 2 letters of recommendation that I'm going to submit. If I had almost no work experience, but I had 2 fantastic academic, people I could ask, I might go with the academic. If I had a few years of work experience, then I would definitely try to ask someone who I had worked for. And then in that combination, if I can find someone who's US based, I would definitely try to make one of those letters from a US based person. So, I mean, I can't really give any solid, like, here's the way to do it for everyone. Of course, I'd have to know more information about your case. But I would say, I would probably try to combine it as much as I could and find, um, try to get different voices going on for what makes you a great candidate. That being said, like I say, having a solid academic letter is great. Having a solid academic letter from a U.S. professor is even better. So there's different weights to this stuff, and you'll kind of have to decide like what's the strongest case for yourself. Okay. I'm asking one professor and 2 from the U.S. dentists. I have assisted here for 1.5 years. Okay, great. That sounds good. Is that okay? I can only get a paper LOR from my dean, which I will send the schools that require. So I'm not sure of your situation, Nazia. You're saying you are going to ask a professor and 2 U.S. dentists that you've assisted here. I can only get a paper LOR from my dean, which I will send to the schools that require. So it sounds like you're submitting more than 3 letters there, because you have 2 here and a professor and then a dean as well. So I don't know. It sounds fine. I mean, if you can figure out how to send 3 that are the strongest, I would go for that. If my dean is no more, can I get a letter from my vice dean? I would wonder, like, why is your dean no more? Does that mean if they've moved on to another university, if you can track them down, I would do that first. If they can't, then yeah, I guess you'll have to choose your vice dean. A lot of times you just can't, you got to do what you can in your power. What if my school has the same letter for everyone? Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. The hope is that you're not going to be in an application pool with a bunch of other people from your university. Hopefully you didn't go to a university that a lot of applicants are coming from to the same university, so they hopefully won't have seen the same letter, That being said, what I would first do is see if I could, I'd contact my school, my dental school, and I would say, I need a letter from the dean. Would you mind if I crafted one and sent it for them to sign? No harm in asking. If they say no, at least I tried. But if they do say no, we only have one version of it and we'll send it out for you, you got to take what you can get. But in that case, I would definitely make my other letter or 2 as strong as I could get. Yeah, so let's see. A lot of good questions here. Let's see if we can answer a few more. I hope to get letters from 2 U.S. dentists that I've been shadowing. Is that enough? From Syed. I want to say no. It's my gut feeling. It's not enough. Like I say, depending on what your program is, I mean, not all programs go through CAPED, so, some of them require 2 letters. Some programs recommend 3. So if you're going to be able to submit 3 letters, and you can submit a dean letter and maybe 2 U.S. dental ones that you've shadowed, that might be enough. But then I would also ask, have you done did you do any practicing in your home country? And if so, that's significant. Then I might consider having one of those letters. Instead of 2 U.S. dentists that you've shadowed, I might have one of those letters from your previous supervisor or boss, because that says a lot about you. They saw you in a working environment, in a clinical environment, and saw how you worked, and it was the real deal as you as a dentist. Shadowing demonstrates some stuff, but you know what I mean? Like having a letter that says, yes, this person did treatments, and here's their patient, here's a patient bedside manner, here's how they interacted with stress, here's how they dealt, here's how they juggled everything. That says a lot. versus this person showed up and shadowed once a week and they were very consistent and punctual. I mean, that's nice, but it's, definitely important. It's great they're US, so there's a strength there, but at the same time, it's just shadowing. So I would hope if you can try to figure out, maybe you can bring in some work experience, a letter, LOR from a work experience situation. And then also if you can find a way to bring in an academic letter, given that you can submit 3. And if you can only submit 2 letters, maybe one would be the US shadowing experience, and one would be an academic letter if I had to choose. But yeah, I mean, again, it's really what would be the strongest. The letters from my school are brief and short and equal for all students. I think this is a common problem, as we're starting to see that, schools like to just pump this stuff out. They don't want to spend a lot of time with them. And so again, if you are applying to a program that requires a dean's letter, you have nothing you can do about this. I mean, you have to submit that dean's letter, even if it's a standard cookie cutter letter. If it's not required that you submit the dean letter, but they are more flexible, then I would and all they're going to do is give me a standard cookie cutter dean letter, then maybe I would reach out to a professor that knew me well and could speak better for my unique skills. That might be a better way of doing it, because at least it's personal. It shows highlights me in a better way. And again, what I would definitely try at least to ask if I know you send me out the standard letter. Could I send you an updated version of that, or could I revise it a little bit? Again, no harm in asking. What would be the best of the 2? I see. U.S. Dentist who you did shadowing for 7 months. U.S. dentist working as a dental assistant for the past year. My professor, I also worked in his practice for 2 years. So if I had to choose one of those letters, I'm guessing you're giving me one choice here. I would definitely say not the U.S. dentist that you did shadowing. So it's either between the U.S. dentist that you worked for a year, or your professor who you worked in his practice for 2 years, I imagine in your home country. That's a tough one. It's a tough one. The U.S. dentist carries some significant weight, even though you're a dental assistant. If I had a strong dean letter, I might go with a U.S. dental assistant, because it would be nice to have, one letter that's from your home country and then one letter from a U.S. dentist, basically. So that might be what I would do. That being said, but if I don't need a dean letter and I could submit 2, then I would definitely do the U.S. dentist and the dental professor. I would do the both of those. So I don't know what your situation is, but I mean, it's something to think about. If I get my letter from a previous dean, it will not be on my school letterhead. Will that letter be valid? This is a situation I can't really say the specifics of any details like this, but I will say you can always contact the school. They have people that can help with this. Just send them an email and just say, here's my situation. My current dean is gone. He's willing to write me a letter, but of course it wouldn't be on the letterhead because he no longer works there. Would you accept that still? And usually this will end up in an admin assistant inbox. They'll be able to give you a quick yes or no. And if they really need an official, letter with the letterhead, they'll let you know that. My guess would be that they won't. That if they can verify that he or she was indeed the dean, then, and that they're the ones writing the letter to, they'll probably be cool with that. But again, I don't know the specifics, so you might want to contact the school, or if you're applying to many schools, contact 1 or 2 schools, get a vibe. Like if they both say yes, it's fine. probably it's okay to send it to even more because it doesn't sound like it's going to be an issue. But if one says yes and one says no, it might be safer then to, you know, reach out to the new dean, I guess, in that case, or, you know, you might be able to send some with the new dean and some with the old. I mean, lots you can do, but I would definitely reach out to the school to get that specific answer because it's a pretty specific question. I don't have a good professor letter of recommendation, even though the school requires a professor. Can I just use a U.S. dentist letter of recommendation in place? So when you say I don't have a good professor letter of recommendation, my first thought would be, can you get one? Can you write something up and contact a professor and say, hey, would you mind? And if you can't think, you know, if one professor has already given you a mediocre letter, contact another professor and see if you can get them to agree to sign off on a letter that you write. So get a good letter if you can from them. If they're asking and one of their requirements is a dental professor, then I would do everything I can to satisfy that requirement, because if you don't, you're just knocking points down on your application. So really work to do that, because a U.S. dentist letter, it's either going to be a dental assistantship or a dental observership, and again, it'd be nice to have something academic from your dental school. Rem, any coupons for today? No, I'm afraid tonight we don't have any for today. But again, everything changes week by week, so we might have one next time. So stay tuned. But you know, again, we're you know, some people like the coupons, some people don't. Some people use them, some people don't, and so we try not to have anything too like set in stone that we'll always have one. But definitely watch out for those because sometimes we do bring them in. Anyway, thank you all. I'm getting a lot of. Looks like a lot of questions are done. Just going to read a couple more. If I get a letter of recommendation for 2 U.S. dental professors and 1 public health professor, and I also have 5 years experience, do I need a recommendation for my home country? That's a good question. You know, obviously the school is going to depend. Some schools will require a letter from your dental school. So if that's the case, yes. But if you have solid 5 years of experience in your country, I mean, that's pretty solid. So you know, again, 2 U.S. dental professors, I would go with one of them, and I would try to get one from your home country, either your previous supervisor that you worked for or boss, or a professor or dean from your home country. Because you have 5 years experience, you might as well highlight that. You know, that's an important sign to say there. Yeah, so the last question, how does the CAPIT electronic LOR system work? And will we still need to write a draft for the professor dean? So, I mean, with the LORs for the CAPIT, I can't exactly remember if you have to, the only thing I don't remember is if you can copy and paste the letter in as text into the CAPIT system, or if you upload it as a PDF. I'm guessing you upload it as a PDF, and so they would scan, you know, you'd have your recommender scan it and email it to you. Back in the old days, it was fax, now it's email. So I'm guessing that they want you to upload as a PDF. Maybe some of you know better and you could correct me on that. But that being said, yes, I would if I could, I would send a draft to the professor or dean if they'll let me, and just clear that with them first. First email them and just say, you know, would you write a letter? You get the response, yes, I'd be happy to write you a letter. Next question, next email goes out, would you mind if I sent you a, you know, a draft? Or maybe in the first email you can even say, I'd be happy to send you a draft of just kind of what my experience and my, you know, my time at dental school with you, etc. And usually they'll respond to like, that'd be great, thank you, I'd be happy to write that letter, and then you can send that draft to them. So that's what I would do. Definitely before you send the draft to them, you know, talk to someone, get some help with the editing, get some help with that letter, make it polished, make it really good, so that when they sign off on it, it doesn't need any more editing work, because you want them to be able to sign on the completed version of that. And so that's my thought on that. It would be to really work on those LORs before you necessarily send anything their way. So great. Any other questions that you have, feel free to email us at mail@internationaldentistcentral.com. I really appreciate everyone's patience tonight with our technical glitches. We will make sure that next week everything is smooth. And if you have any other questions, again, feel free to email us. I'll leave this replay up for about a day or so make sure to check that out. And then we'll be putting it in our members only area. And we'll also be creating a members only kind of like plan for our course. We have like a members area of our website that you get when you sign up for one of our courses, either the bench test or the interview course. And we're going to be making just a special plan that includes all of our workshops, all of our past workshops, our member meetings, some of them are member meetings, stuff on interviewing, stuff on the bench test that we've done in the past that's no longer available publicly on YouTube. But all that's going to be available, and we're going to have that for a special, pretty reasonable monthly charge that you guys can take advantage of. So we'll have more information about that probably next time, and you'll get that information. You get that access if you sign up for one of our courses. But if you're not a member of those courses, we're going to try to make that available to some of you guys because a lot of you have asked for that. So anyway, thanks so much for your time. Have a great night, and we'll see you next time. Take good care.